Thanks for joining us for this special report on Fox43.com and the Fox 43 Plus app. I'm Alex Cawley. State leaders, including Governor Josh Shapiro and officials from the Departments of Health, Environmental Protection, as well as Labor and Industry, are expected to have an update on proposed ICE facilities in Berks and Schuylkill counties any moment. We're going to take you to the news conference now.
guys can come in here behind us. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by just giving you a readout on what brings me here today, and then I'm happy to take some questions here. Obviously, as you know, the federal government, in a secret move, announced that they intended to construct 2 massive ICE detention centers here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, one in Berks County and one in Schuylkill County. I want to be very clear. I don't want either of these sites here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And while the federal government has enormous power to place these across the country, I want you to know we are not powerless here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I intend to use every tool at my disposal to stop these facilities from coming here. I just wrapped up about an hour and a half or so long meeting with leaders from both Berks and Schuylkill counties, county commissioners, state lawmakers, subject matter experts from those communities. For example, the individual that runs the water systems in one of those counties, to come here and to learn not only where the individual leaders in these communities stand, but more importantly, the negative impact this will have on these communities. I've obviously been very outspoken about the violation of constitutional rights at the hands of ICE, and I continue to believe that they are on a failed mission directed by President Trump and Secretary Noem, and they're violating people's constitutional rights all across this country. These 2 facilities, in addition to, I believe, being violative of people's constitutional rights, given the direction and the mission, will have significant and negative impacts on these 2 local communities. Let me just talk about some of those negative impacts that came up during our meeting. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer any of your questions if you want to dive a little bit deeper. From the representatives of Berks County and Schuylkill County, a lot of frustration, and we share this at the Commonwealth level, with the secrecy around this process. They really didn't learn about this until the deeds were filed and the deal was done. And so that rendered them really powerless to stop it in that initial process. There is real concern, I think, in both counties, and certainly I feel this across this Commonwealth, of this having a negative impact on the community economically, taking away attention from the kind of job growth that we want in these counties. I think there are real questions that were raised about who's actually going to be running these facilities and whether they will protect the human rights of the individuals involved. There was a lot of discussion about just simply the lack of water that will be available for these facilities. We know, for example, in Tremont, that if this is built, they will literally run out of water within 24 hours. Let me explain what that means to the average homeowner nearby on that system. That means that they literally won't be able to turn on the water in their kitchen and fill up a pot of water. They won't be able to flush the toilet. The Tremont water system today services 700 households, 700 households. They would need to triple their capacity. But understand the Tremont water system can't keep up with the demand as it currently stands. So even if this ICE facility was not coming here, they are struggling to keep up. By the way, through no fault of their own, they're working incredibly hard at this. They're struggling to keep up with the demand as it exists with 700 customers right now. And even with the dollars that the federal government seem to want to pledge to these facilities, there's just simply no capacity in the ground for the amount of water that would be needed. So the federal government has said in sort of very general terms, well, we could truck the water in. Well, when you truck the water in, first, you're not going to be able to truck in enough. And you not only have to truck in clean water, you've got to truck away wastewater. And you're talking about then destroying our infrastructure, the roads in the areas of which many of them are 1 lane in, 1 lane out. This is obviously not a feasible solution. In addition to the concerns that were raised about water and sewer capacity, there were real concerns raised about the capacity of this community to provide the health care that is going to be needed for the individuals who are in there. Right now, they're struggling to have enough nurses, enough healthcare leaders to be able, and we're joined by Dr. Bogen, the leader of the Pennsylvania Department of Health, to be able to just simply meet the needs of the community today. You go add 9,000 people to 2 warehouses in this region, the federal government's either going to pull away healthcare personnel from existing healthcare facilities for the community, or they're not going to be able to have the kind of healthcare that is needed to be able to care for those who are in those facilities. A lot of conversation about how this would tax local fire and EMS. We have one volunteer fire company, one EMS company that serves the community today. This would end up being, I believe one of the commissioners said, the second largest community in Schuylkill County if this were to be built. We simply don't have the fire and EMS and first responder capacity to deal with it. The 911 system would be taxed and make it very, very difficult for the 911 system to be able to operate. The federal government alluded to one of the commissioners that they would be making use of the local airstrip here. Well, there's going to be a lot of infrastructure that's needed in order to make that airstrip viable, and what would that do to the local community if that airstrip is no longer available for the local community? Through it all, there was a lot of conversation just about how this would diminish the quality of life in both Berks and Schuylkill counties, and I would argue across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And while that is maybe sometimes harder to quantify on a sheet of paper, I think we all want to live in communities where people enjoy laying their heads at night, enjoy going to work, enjoy going out to play or take a walk or raising their kids. And this would undermine the quality of life that so many have worked so hard in order to develop here. So there was a significant amount of concern. Through it all, one of the themes that kept coming up through all of the elected leaders, and I should point out, since we live in a hyper-partisan, hyper-polarized world, I was speaking to Republicans and Democrats, and at times during the conversation, you wouldn't know who was the Democrat, who was the Republican. Folks were universal in expressing their concerns about this. And I noted many of the elected leaders were extraordinarily frustrated by the fact that the federal government has refused to provide answers here. I noted that one of the elected leaders there pointed out that their own congressman, Congressman Mooser, was frustrated by the lack of response. Now, that was according to the commissioner. I didn't speak directly to the congressman about that. But I think it speaks to the fact that the federal government is not answering the questions, is not providing the answers that this community needs. I want to be very, very clear about something. I am against these facilities. You know my track record of taking on this administration and winning. And I'm going to do everything in my legal power and my regulatory power to see to it that these facilities are not sited here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. After concluding this meeting here today, I'm even more determined to do everything in my power to stop these facilities. To hear from Republicans and Democrats alike expressing opposition to this, I think speaks volumes about how unwanted these facilities are in our communities. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Rosie, you can decide who to pick on here, but I'm happy to answer your questions as we go forward here.
Governor, can you talk just from the regulatory standpoint what you would hope to accomplish in blocking this?
I think there are a number of regulatory steps we could take through the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health, Department of Labor and Industry. We're joined by Secretary Walker, who leads L&I. I'm not going to get into the specific steps we are going to take, but I can assure you over the next couple weeks or so here, we'll be prepared to take them. And I think this meeting here today helped answer some of the questions that my lead counsels on this, Mike Fisher and Jacob Boyer, who join us here, some of the questions they had, I think, were answered here today, so that's going to be helpful as we go forward. I think, I answer your questions very forthrightly. I'm going to be a little bit more careful about sort of projecting the specific legal steps we're going to take. I hope you can understand.
I've been speaking to a lot of community activists and advocates, and there's a lot of concern over human rights abuses, potentially because of the lack of infrastructure in the area, and because of how many people it fits and where these people would be coming from, if that's going to lead to people just being blindly detained for the color of their skin or the language they speak. Can you speak to some of those concerns and what can be done to protect more people?
Well, I'm extremely concerned about human rights abuses that we've seen from ICE all across this country, and I do not want that coming here to Pennsylvania, which is why we're organizing and mobilizing to do everything we can to stop it. I think the concerns about human rights are very real. By the way, we heard it from Republican and Democratic office holders in this meeting we just concluded today.
Governor, in terms of Congressman Muser, who you just mentioned, and the federal partners, what kind of communication, if any, has there been from the congressman to these leaders who you spoke with, or the federal partners to any of these leaders?
Several of the county commissioners relied on the congressman to set up meetings or telephonic meetings with DHS. My understanding, according to the commissioners, is the congressman was able to set those meetings up, and that they left those meetings feeling unsatisfied with the answers that they were given and feeling as though there was a lack of transparency coming from the federal government, a lack of answers coming from the federal government. Beyond that, you'd have to ask the congressman what, I'm not here to tell you what the congressman thinks. I'm just here to relay what those commissioners shared with me.
Yes, I mean, I don't think you want to get too into the details of like what the specific legal mechanisms are, but there are, in Maryland, they filed a lawsuit alleging that there was a violation of federal law.
Yep.
When these were done. You're talking about state law. There are a lot of like local, zoning ordinances that could affect whether something's a warehouse or a detention center. I mean, are you working on all three of those, or are you focusing on the state?
Prior to serving as governor, I served as attorney general. I took the Trump administration to court dozens of times. As governor, I've used my authority leading this Commonwealth as the chief executive. I've taken this president to court 19 times. I've not lost a single case. Part of the reason why we're so successful is we don't forecast all of it ahead of time. We dot our I's, we cross our T's, we follow the law, unlike this administration in Washington. So I think my answer to you on that would be stay tuned. We're looking at anything and any way possible to be able to stop these facilities from coming here to Pennsylvania.
Governor, Congressman Muser actually remarked that he thinks that the federal government can fix those infrastructure problems, and also said that it would be good for the economy, saying that it would bring in about 2,000 jobs to at least one facility. Do you want to comment on those remarks?
I didn't hear the congressman say that. I will tell you, we have the only growing economy in the northeastern part of the United States. For 32 straight months, our unemployment rate has been below the national rate. We're getting noticed all across the country for the massive deals that we are landing, from AWS to Lilly to J&J just in the last few weeks. Our economy is growing. What we do not need are efforts from ICE to undermine our economic growth. And my view, and I think it's backed up by Republicans and Democrats alike here, is that this would undermine our economy in Pennsylvania. And I do not want the federal government to step in and hurt the economic growth that we've seen.
So right now, what state permits does ICE need to expand
I didn't hear the
water?
beginning of your
What
question.
state permits do the facilities need to expand water and sewage capacity?
They need a number of permits through the Department of Environmental Protection. They need other permits and other regulatory approvals from the Commonwealth, and we're examining each of them.
Governor, there's been a number of distribution center facilities built in our region over the past couple of years. There's some folks that have expressed frustration that they could become targets for this rather than commercial jobs and getting tenants like that.
Yeah. This is not the kind of, this is not what we want in our communities. We want to be able to create the kind of jobs that are going to be family sustaining. We want to create the kind of jobs that aren't going to undermine the trust in a community between law enforcement and the neighbors that they serve and protect. We want the kind of jobs that we're seeing all across this Commonwealth, in technology and pharmaceutical, the other jobs I've been able to land in my first 3 years as governor. We do not want ICE bringing this type of havoc into our communities, period.
Governor, a Berks County Commissioner said in a public meeting this morning that what he has learned is that DHS is considering having its own on-site sewer system that could then be pumped and separately taken to a treatment plant. And there's been some questions around whether or not that type of setup requires a DEP permit.
DEP is going to have to be involved in any of the trucking or any of those on-site facilities.
Governor, can you respond to some comments by Senator Pennycook that she made after the budget hearings this week about PSP and the handling of things after what happened at the residence last year? She said that you violated protocol following that by moving your family back to Montgomery County at your private residence, and suggested that you put them at unnecessary risk. Can you respond to what she said?
Well, first off, that evening after my family and I were attacked and someone tried to kill me, we followed the guidance of the state police as to where to go and when to go. And we follow the guidance of the state police every single day as it relates to my safety, my wife's safety, our kids' safety, the lieutenant governor's safety, the second lady's safety, and their child Harper's safety. None of that has changed, and we follow the guidance strictly as to what the state police advise us to do. Sometimes it forces me to have to change my schedule or to go in a different way or to lay my head at night in a different place because of what the state police says. Look, I think it is shameful that there are some Republicans trying to score political points at the expense of my family's safety. I mean, is this what low level we've stooped to in this Commonwealth? I think it speaks volumes about their character or frankly lack thereof. And look, I got to say, you know, no father wants to have to deal with this with their children. No parent wants to have to explain to their kid, we have a safe room in our house now because there are people who want to try to kill us. There's a guy just arrested, I think, a week or two ago who's in prison for stalking my family and making terroristic threats. I don't want my kids to have to look out a window and have it be hazy because we're now living behind bulletproof glass, where I can't go out in privacy and have a catch with my kid. This is the way we have to live now. And we choose to live that way because I want to serve the good people of Pennsylvania. But if this is what Republicans want to do now, play these shameful games, attack me and my family, make it harder for my family to be safe, I think that speaks volumes about their lack of character.
Did you invite Representative Tambuser to this meeting today?
I don't know. I can ask my staff if he was invited or his representatives were. Happy to, Rosie can get back to you on that.
Okay. And have you received any response following your letter?
Secretary, no? No, I have not.
In terms of the broad power that the federal government has to do this, normally when a facility gets built, there's meetings, there's approval. What is some of that? Can you just describe what the broad power is that the federal government has to purchase and bring this facility in?
Well, they made the purchase in secret. They could explain how they did that in secret. The commissioners were complaining about the fact that they even filed the deed in secret. So they sort of learned about it after the fact. Obviously, the laws of this country give extraordinary latitude to the federal government. But there is the 10th Amendment, and the states do retain certain rights and sovereignty. And that will manifest itself in a number of different ways, from permits at DEP to other regulatory processes. And I intend to use every single bit of power that is reserved to me at my disposal as the leader of this Commonwealth to stand up to the federal government in what I see as an overreach that would create havoc in our communities, that would bring the kind of chaos and cruelty that we're seeing from this administration every day into Pennsylvania. I'm going to stand up and do everything in my power to stop them. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for this special report. We'll have more details of what leaders had to say in a few hours on Fox 43 News, first at 4. Have a good day.